and Weil, Andre Weil, right?
Yeah,
Andre Weil
Weil.
also, he gave an analogy of curves, points, and surfaces as being different avatars of Vishnu. So can you please tell the audience about that as well?
Oh, yes. So this is very interesting. So Andre Weil was very attuned to the Eastern tradition, and he actually visited India and I think lectured at the Tata Institute Fundamental Science in Mumbai. And so in his letter to his sister, which was written in 1940, he talks about this how mathematicians perceive these analogies. And so it's kind of a very interesting, I don't know if I should actually, I have my book here, so I don't know if I should actually quote, this quote is here somewhere. And he mentions Bhagavad Gita, which is a kind of a sacred text of Hinduism. So, and he says, when you get an insight, it's just kind of an inkling of an idea, as opposed to when it's already understood. It talks about this dialectics of the experience of passing from that moment of recognition, but you're not sure yet. You just start seeing the outline, and then when it's actually already done, and it's something very interesting because like you fall in love, kind of like. So most people probably would least expect a mathematician to be so poetic about it, about the nature of discovery in mathematics. But he says, so what happened? This is a translation into English. So what happens when this inkling of an analogy between two theories turned into concrete knowledge? He says, gone are the two theories, gone their troubles, and delicious reflections in one another, their furtive caresses, their inexplicable quarrels. Alas, we have but one theory now, whose majestic beauty can no longer excite us. So the excitement comes from that moment, the recognition, he's basically saying. Nothing is more fertile than this illicit liaisons. Nothing gives more pleasure to the connoisseur. This initial moment of discovery, this initial moment of insight. And he says the pleasure comes from the illusion and the kindling of the senses. Once the illusion disappears and knowledge is acquired, we attain indifference. In the Bhagavad Gita, there are some lucid verses to this effect. And then he goes, but let's go back to the algebraic function. Mm-hmm. So, in other words, there is this depth of understanding. So mathematics does give one this vantage point, I suppose, which is very poetic and one could say romantic. And I can feel that viscerally what he's talking about, because coming up with a discovery in mathematics, it does feel like that. But so does everything else. Fall in love is kind of like this. Although one could say it's not necessarily that you kind of attain indifference of once it settles. The idea is that that's the difference between human relationship, which is living, which can live and evolve and transform itself and reinvent itself forever or for a long time. In mathematics, once the theory is completed, in some sense, it's already fixed. It doesn't grow. It can grow then the next level and so on, but there is a sense of indifference. So that's kind of connected to what I was talking about, the difference between art and mathematics. In art, in some sense, there is more of a living thing.
Yes. Something that's popular nowadays is to say that there is no theory of everything. And in part, they'll quote Feynman and say, well, it's supposed to be like an onion, even though onions are finite. They have like 10 to 20 layers. So that's actually, it's a poor analogy because we've revolutionized physics maybe 10 to 20 times in different ways. So we should be at the core. But also that there's something romantic about it, about there not being a theory of everything. Because if there was, then we think the ultimate questions are done. But the theory of everything in physics has a certain meaning of like reconciling dynamic space-time with quantum theory. And so that's not exactly like the answers to everything, quote unquote. But even if there was, it could be that the answer to everything, quote unquote, is something that's animated. So it could be something like at the bottom of, I know this is extremely poetic to say, but it could be like the theory of everything is to live lovingly. In which case, it's not like an apprehensible, timeless, dead fact, like certain theorems are, but rather rather a process rather than a state.
I agree. That's a process. It's a process. It's a process. The connotation I think most people have of theory of everything is that it's something static that is done, and then we have this knowledge which somehow will cover everything, and that is very counterproductive, in my view, and even I would say dangerous, and has unfortunately impeded progress and caused a lot of suffering to scientists, but not only because it's the mindset. Because today people trust scientists to be the forward-looking and kind of like more advanced, the way they used to look up to theologians or priests or poets or artists. Now, for better or for worse, it's the scientists who are the priests, so to speak, in this era. And so if we are confused about this, if we entertain these ideas, that they propagate to general culture. And this is what happened in some sense. This idea of insatiable, in my view, this insatiable appetite for trying to explain everything with the knowledge I have right now. If you think about it, this is absurd. And all the history of humanity shows that it's absurd. And yet the impulse is so strong. And I'm not going to say it's those other people have to. It's me. I have been like this all my life, up until maybe very recently. So I know exactly how tempting this is. I also know how counterproductive it is and how much suffering comes from it.